I don't think I've filmed seats being cleaned outside of a car before, so when a mate hit me up about some rare but manky pug items he was looking to flog, thought it might be worth whipping the camera out for a bit of a pre-sale scrub. So these 20-odd-year-old Peugeot seats, which had originally come out of a limited edition 106 produced to celebrate the French Open, had been sat gathering dust and greasy fingerprints at the back of a unit for quite some time, and while certain parts of their panels were too far gone to be able to fully rescue with a transformative deep clean, we're still confident that with a few familiar tools and products could breathe enough life back into them overall to justify both a video and subsequent for sale listing. Now, while I had aimed to get these seats sorted in one fell swoop, once I got stuck into them, realised they were likely going to take me a couple of days to adequately clean and film, and that plus the fact a dirty and dingily lit environment didn't really suit a light coloured seat refresh or my camera, meant I'd have to relocate for some brighter, more crisp shots part way through. But with my gear now unpacked and the novelty of being undercover, thought I could at least clean one on location. So got to work first vacuuming the driver's seat off to suck up any loose dirt that might serve to clog up the subsequent wet cleaning stages. And doing this, which 9 times out of 10 I'll use a crevice tool and soft dusting brush for, not only removes dry and unsightly dirt, but also allows you to get acquainted with unfamiliar surfaces, so you can devise an appropriate deep cleaning plan of attack. Following the initial vac, the upholstered panels were then quickly pre-treated with some antibacterial Gtechniq Tri-Clean to begin to break up the years worth of embedded grime and farts buried deep within. And I sprayed these parts down first, as you obviously can't safely leave aging leather to soak in product for anywhere near as long. I then went ahead and sprayed the deeply ingrained leather bits down with the same product before thoroughly scrubbing them over with a Dodo Juice hairy palm brush, a triple duty type item and a magic eraser for particularly stubborn spots, resourcefully blasting things with plenty of hot steam from the open-ended hose of the Bissell SpotClean Hydrosteam I featured in my last video, which isn't really designed to be used this way but thought could still help things along, before temporarily drying them off with a general purpose towel and either repeating the process or moving on. Now, for old leather that wasn't in the best nick to begin with, this was quite a heavy-handed approach, but if you neglect things for years then want them turned around later down the line, can't also expect to be able to do that in minimally impactful fashion. So while you should always give the gentle option a go first, as you might get lucky, realistically, anything but an all-guns blazing approach here wouldn't have got me anywhere, so just bear that in mind while watching me scrub, steam and hopefully abrade my way back to pre-sale glory. Once the leather had been deep cleaned, I got to work extracting the dark green upholstery that had now been soaking in solution for around 15 minutes. And while for whatever reason it didn't look like there was a great deal of discoloured fluid being extracted from it, the material did look quite heavily soiled to begin with, plus probably hadn't been properly cleaned like this for a number of years, so ensured it was all thoroughly covered, as spots of overlooked dirt would be more trouble to deal with later down the line. And while some may prefer to clean upholstery before the leather, you're inevitably going to have to deal with a bit of cross-contamination either way. But my opinion is that as long as you deal with any of that before moving on, it doesn't really matter which you go for first. Now, speaking of moving on, I then decided to up sticks from the dingy unit and head home with a jam-packed boot to get to grips with the rest of the seats at my own pace rather than rush to get them all done in one soiled sitting. And while I'd swapped a self-contained unit for a basic block-paved side, as long as it was bright enough for the camera, I was confident I'd still be able to muster up some realistic results. I decided to continue on with the remaining upholstered panels using some super cheap but hopefully still cheerful Astonish Vac Max solution that wasn't purchased specifically for the job but rather just pulled from the spares and repairs cupboard, as I'd realised what remained of the Tri-Clean product was going to be needed for the leather alone. So after quickly crevice tooling the fabric parts with Mini Henry to remove any loose bits of dirt and dust that you couldn't really see here but were there in the flesh, generously pre-sprayed them down via the Bissell until semi-saturated, then scrubbed things over with the stiff bristles of the extraction head just to try and ensure I got the best out of the cheap solution, before finally committing to a thorough hour-long steam extraction session which would hopefully give the neglected lawn green fibres a nice new pre-sale lease of life. Now, unlike the leather, aside from a few bobbles, there was no obvious signs of heavy wear or tear on the limited edition upholstery, so knew that with enough steamy elbow grease, that at least would look acceptably fresh for the final aftershots. And even if it doesn't look like there's loads of dirt being extracted, it's still worth thoroughly going through the motions with previously neglected surfaces like these, as it can essentially be hidden within the frothy white cleaning chemical. But either way, with a fair bit of fabric to cover, stuck with it until I was about as sure as I could be that they'd go on to dry in a uniformly clean fashion, as the last thing you want after calling it a day is to realise you've left the surface with a new patchwork quilt pattern of clean and not so clean. So with the fabric all sorted, aside from maybe a quick once over to suck up any leather cleaning splatter, it was then time to get to grips with the remaining parts of that, which I knew was going to take a decent chunk of time. So set about it from top to bottom in pretty much the same way as before, although I did steam some of the panels over first, not necessarily to melt the dirt away, but rather to soften things up and open the pores of the leather to try and make the subsequent mechanical agitation a bit more effective. And again, while I'd really rather not have to heavily scrub aging leather with stiff bristles and abrasive sponges if I don't have to, if that's the only way to get it clean, then so be it, as there's no point being super safe and gentle only for things to remain dirty. Some parts of the rear seat panels were noticeably stained from exposure to something damaging, and while I was pretty sure that these areas of discoloration were beyond cleaning, still thought it was worth giving them a good going over to rule the possibility of transformation out. So thoroughly soaked, scrubbed, steamed and rubbed. But unfortunately, in order to make it disappear, I had to take the factory finish with it, which was okay for what would be an unseen test spot, but obviously wasn't an option for the rest of the leather. But at least I now knew not to waste my energy scrubbing away in futile fashion, and to instead focus my remaining efforts on the non-stained parts, ensuring they were brought up to an acceptable sale-worthy standard, which took a bit of time, but I'm happy to invest energy in methodical cleaning activities so long as I know the surfaces being dealt with will look better for it. Then once I felt they did, quickly ran the steam extractor over the upholstered panels once more just to eliminate any frothy watermarks that had been inadvertently inflicted while dealing with the manky leather, before calling it a day for the deep cleaning there. So after being left to thoroughly dry overnight, the leather parts of the seats were then given a good creaming with some of CarGods leather perfection stuff to replenish and hydrate, which, following their multifaceted beating the day before, desperately needed. So dabbed and spread a healthy amount of the cream over the leather, a section at a time with a soft foam applicator pad. Gave it a few minutes to soak off camera once I had, then gently buffed it over with a fresh, dry, general-purpose towel to remove any excess and leave a bit of a fresh lustre behind, which on darker coloured leather or more modern stuff you might not want, but for lighter leather that had been sat festering for years, I think was just the ticket. As well as light cleansers, this product also contains oils and waxes to moisturise and condition, and I finger fettled the formula into a few of the leather's folds and creases for good measure here, which was a comparatively therapeutic affair. But the leather had stood up to the heavy-handed cleaning that had gone before surprisingly well, so I felt it deserved some fastidious replenishment, and once it had had ample time to thoroughly consume some cream, wrap things up by first dressing the plastic trim along the bottom, which had been thoroughly steamed over the day before, with a healthy dose of turtle wax's inside job, mostly just because it smells great, but also because, like the leather cream, I hadn't used it for quite some time, before treating the upholstered panels to one last quick vac to remove any stray bits of lint, so I could then go on to grab some final after shots in as contaminant-free fashion as possible. So while from some select angles the 20-odd-year-old tennis-themed Peugeot seats now look basically brand new, they were still sporting plenty of wear and tear, but overall the multi-stage deep clean had ensured they no longer looked like they'd been pulled from a skip, and could now at least be safely listed for sale in used but thoroughly clean condition. And while I know my last video was of similar subject matter, couldn't say no to getting to grips with these quirky seats on camera. But either way, with back-to-back interior-related uploads, promise to return with an actual car being cleaned in some way, shape or form for you next time.